Ethica Nicomachean by Aristotle. Aristotle's lectures as recorded by his son Nicomachean. The principal ideas of which are that the good is that at which all things aim, the good for man is happiness, happiness is the realization of man's essential nature. The virtue or excellence of a thing is the full development of the potentialities of its essential nature. Since man is essentially a rational animal, the good for man is activity of the soul in accordance with reason. To act in accordance with reason, to be virtuous, usually involves choosing the mean between extremes of conduct. For example, the virtue courage is the mean between rashness and cowardice. Some kinds of acts are inherently bad, and no temperate action is possible in such cases. For example, adultery and murder. The good life involves friendship with virtuous men and the development of the intellectual virtues. The highest good for man is the contemplative life. Dante's description of alcohol. Oh God, my subconscious has spoken. No, wait a minute. I'll start again. Dante's description of Aristotle as the master of those who know has an appropriate ambiguity. It suggests Aristotle's mastery of his predecessor's knowledge and also his influence, paralleled only by Plato's, on his philosophical descendants. Both aspects of this mastery are prominent in the Ethica Nicomachean. It is to Aristotle's credit that he gives full recognition to the contributions of other philosophers, and it is to his glory that so many basic ethical ideas of later philosophers are found in this great seminal work. While scholarly explanations of the work differ, it is generally agreed that the work was not intended for publication in its present form. It is a version of Aristotle's Ethics as stated by his son Nicomachean, or Nicomachean. The Eudemian Ethics, a record composed by one of Aristotle's pupils, Eudemus, supplements this work. The Nicomachean Ethics is part of a vast scientific and philosophical system to which a teleological view of the universe is basic. All things are to be understood in terms of their purposes. The ends towards which they tend, ends inherent in the forms and integral to their nature. Inherent in their forms and integral to their natures. Defining the end or good of man by reference to his nature, Aristotle's ethics is a kind of naturalism, but not a reductionism failing to distinguish a higher sense of nature from one meaning simply whatever is or occurs. It thus suggests, though it does not fully develop, the crucial difference between the factual and the ideal. The normative element, the oughtness of virtue, is determined by the end or good by which virtue is understood. There is thus no non-natural, self-subsistent or supernatural source of obligation, but this is no loss to an ethics grounded firmly in the Aristotelian psychology and metaphysics. Aristotle's psychological approach appears when he begins his investigation of the final good by reference to what he regards as a general fact of human and animal behavior. He cites the dictum of a predecessor that the good is that at which all things aim, But there are many aims. Some goods are desired for themselves, some for the sake of others, and to avoid an infinite regression of goods, merely instrumental to others, we must presuppose intrinsic goods, and if one appears to be more ultimate than any other, this will be the chief good. Its criteria will be finality and self-sufficiency. It will be valued for its own sake, and its achievement will leave nothing to be desired. Everyone agrees, Aristotle notes, that happiness is thus final and self-sufficient. We desire other goods for the sake of this happiness, but never this for the sake of others. But this general agreement is merely verbal. Specific descriptions of happiness are so varied that a detailed inquiry is obviously needed. Among previous theories of the good is that of Aristotle's teacher, Plato, who held that good is a self-subsistent essence, a universal form or idea in which all particular good things participate, and by which alone they are good. Aristotle objects, however, that if nothing but this form is good intrinsically, the good would be both empty of content and unattainable. In the practice of arts and sciences aiming at their own particular ends, it does not seem that the knowledge of this universal good is prerequisite. Hence, Aristotle turns to a search for the specifically human good. This must be found in man's own form and function, qua man. To understand the latter, we must consider briefly the Aristotelian concept of matter and form, derived but considerably altered from that of Plato. Except for pure matter and pure form, terminal limits posited by the system rather than experienced differences in reality, the matter and form of any given thing are its two aspects of potentiality and actuality, separable only in analysis. Matter is the stuff, form the structure, matter is the thatness, form the whatness of things. Matter without form is hardly conceivable, and form without matter is empty abstraction. Form, not mere structure, however, for what a thing is or becomes when its potentialities are actualized, depends not only on shape or organization, but also on function. The traditional illustration here is that of the acorn, which is a potential oak tree. Maybe it's starting and I'm so tired. And I haven't been drinking either. But the tree in turn may be matter for a higher form in any case. Say, it is made into a piece of furniture, and obviously the acorn itself must be mature to the form, oak tree seed, before it can function as material for the future tree. Thus the end or telos of the acorn is integral to its nature, and its good is to fulfill its formal function well, to become a strong, well-shaped tree. The end of man must likewise be found in form, which for him is soul. Soul here does not have the connotations given it in Christian tradition. It is not an entity, but rather a level of function of living bodies. Even plants have the nutritive function, or vegetative soul. Lower animals have this, plus a sensory and appetitive or desiderative Desiderative soul. I must be careful with my choice of words next time I write something, remembering that I have to read it. Anyway, the human soul has a higher level, the rational. Now, the excellence or virtue of each thing, according to the meaning of the Greek arete, lies in the efficiency of its peculiar function. Therefore, human good turns out to be an activity of soul in accordance with virtue, and if there are more than one virtue, in accordance with the best and most complete. Two broad divisions in the human soul are the irrational and the rational. The former includes the vegetative, over which reason has no direct control, and the appetitive, partially amenable to rational guidance. The rational part includes the calculative and scientific functions. Corresponding to each of these are various kinds of excellence ranged under the two main types, moral and intellectual virtues. To reach a definition of the first type, Aristotle observes that well-being is achieved through a mean between two extremes, either of which destroys it, as the athlete's fitness is maintained by the proper amount of food, neither too much nor too little. But this is not an arithmetical mean. The proper amount of food for a wrestler would be too much for a businessman. Applying this concept to attitudes, emotions, and conduct, Aristotle develops a relational ethics which is yet not relativistic in the pejorative sense. And I quote, "Virtue is a state of character concerned with choice lying in a mean, that is, the mean relative to us. This being determined by a rational principle, by which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. Now it is a mean between two vices, that which depends on excess and that which depends on defect." End quote. Examples of virtues appropriate to certain activities are as follows. Activity or attitude. 1. Facing death. 2. Experiencing pleasure and pain. 3. Giving and taking money. 4. Attitude toward honor and dishonor. 5. Assertion. 6. Giving amusement. Next is the vice of excess. 1. Rashness. 2. Self-indulgence. 3. Prodigality. 4. Empty vanity. 5. Boastfulness. 6. Buffoonery. Next, the virtue or the mean. Courage, number 1. 2 is temperance. 3. Liberality. 4. Proper pride. 5. Truth-telling. 6. Ready wit. So, I have 5 out of 6 there. I suppose the one that's missing is temperance. Anyway, vice of defect. 1. Cowardice. 2. Insensibility. 3. Meanness. 4. Undue humility. 5. Mock modesty. 6. Boorish. Virtue lies in feeling or acting rightly in relation to time, objects, people, motives, and manner. Though the mean is variable, since some means lie nearer one or the other extreme, there is a mean for most situations the middle course recognized by the practically wise or good man. Aristotle himself notes, however, that this account of virtue and vice is not exhaustive. There are some acts and passions inherently bad, such as spite or envy, adultery or murder. There are no mean, we should say right, ways of feeling or doing these. Neither does the theory apply in the same way to a major virtue, justice. I shall continue with that in part 2.